timer. Score! Oh, it's over. It's over. They score!
That's game. Oh, my goodness.
Big score. Roll the highlight reel. What a ripper. Top Jetta. Spread it on.
It's HNLive Today, and we've got a huge program for you today with a couple of real strong guests. The commissioner of the Saskatchewan Junior Hockey League, Kyle McIntyre, with everything happening in Junior A hockey these days, leading into the Centennial Cup on HNLive, and with Dungeon Wrestling Unfinished Business 2 coming to HNLive on March 29th, we've got the Stu Hart Heritage Champion, Chris Masters, here today with us, Dave.
Yeah, very excited about that. And obviously the road to a national championship we're going to talk a little bit about because that's so exciting, the accolades. You're a national champion. There's going to be a brand new national champion crowned this year in Junior A hockey. And excited to talk to Kyle McIntyre about that. And of course, get a chance to talk some more wrestling. Molly, I'm not going to bring my wrestlers out, my action figures out this week as I did last week. But I can if you like.
We did not forget, Dave, that you called them dolls. So we can all picture you, combing their hair and dressing them up nice and pretty. So let's just imagine Dave Dawson doing that and transition to our read that the show is brought to you by Adrenaline Source for Sports, Calgary's premier store for hockey, lacrosse, and team apparel, recently renovated and bigger and better than ever. A one-stop shop for all your sporting good needs. Visit us online at adrenalinegroup.ca. We fit your game. I had to get that little shot in on you, Dave, because I know you're going to come back at me after your Edmonton Oil Kings took down the Swift Current Broncos on the weekend as we go into our junior hockey report. That was a big, big win for Edmonton, stopping the 7-game win streak of the Broncos.
Did they play last week? Is that good? Yeah. Is that good? So 9 of the last 10, one of the hottest teams in the Western Hockey League, the Swift Current Broncos, 7 NHL draft picks, and it's been a dogfight in the Eastern Conference. It has been talked about at length. So much at stake lately. All 8 teams are just really, really into it. And the Edmonton Oil Kings making it still a bit of a last push. They've had a lot of injuries this year. A young group coming to Rogers Place, the Broncos do, after beating Red Deer the night before. Put 7 goals on, and the Oil Kings beat them 4-1. That's the story. Not going to give anybody any poster board material.
2 teams play again on Wednesday, and we'll see what happens in Swift Current. But the Oil Kings may have been a factor as well in the other major news in the Western Hockey League over the week, the firing of Red Deer Rebels head coach Derek Wasler. And that came after a home-and-home victory a couple weeks ago by the Oil Kings over the Rebels, which has kind of led to a bit of a slide by Red Deer as of late. Dave Struch, former head coach in Saskatoon and Regina, comes on board to try and right that ship before the end of the season. But a team in 5th place, only 2 points out of a 4th, firing their head coach this late in the season. A very unusual move by Brent Sutter.
Yeah, Guy Flaming, my broadcast partner, made an interesting point on the broadcast on the weekend after that happened, and not sure what was going on with behind the scenes with the Sutters, or Brent Sutter and Derek Walser at all, but you can look at it in 2 ways. That a coach gets fired, okay, now things are going to go off the rails. Well, Red Deer was one of the hottest teams in the entire league back in January, and then has been sliding as of late. So maybe bringing in Dave Struch, a guy who's really well known in the Western Hockey League and in hockey in Western Canada, could give that extra boost that the Rebels need, because they have a lot of really highly talented prospects, and interesting to see how it boils down the stretch.
Yeah, I certainly hate to see anyone lose their job, but I have to say I've always liked Dave Struch. I feel like he's been handed a couple of bad cards, taking over as head coach in Saskatoon after the Memorial Cup, after they sent away all their assets trying to load up for the Memorial Cup, and then took over in Regina after the Memorial Cup in the exact same circumstances. So never given really a chance to be a head coach on a team with a good roster, a competitive roster, and we'll see how he does with Red Deer. I hope he does well.
Well, and Dave Struch, I had a chance to chat with him at the Rocky Mountain Classic because he's coaching the U15 Notre Dame Hounds, and I got to broadcast one of their great games there. So a lot of respect for Dave Struch. I know that a number of people in the HNLive family do have respect for him, and he got an opportunity to be on HNLive and to showcase his stuff. So best of luck to Mr. Struch going forward.
Moving to the CJHL, where, of course, we're gearing up and always excited to watch the road for the Centennial Cup, which will be on hockeycanada.ca, and we're the streaming providers for Hockey Canada, so we're very excited to be a part of that. And as we look at the road to the Centennial Cup, we, of course, keep our eye on the playoffs starting in Ontario this week in the AJHL, Dave, the play-in game's getting started.
That's absolutely right, and one of the ones that I don't raise an eyebrow, but it's always fun to look at when the 60th anniversary of the AJHL this year, they brought in the interlock concept. They wanted more parity. So yeah, Fort McMurray and Canmore is one of the play-in series, and geographically doesn't make things very easy by any stretch of the imagination, but I think it's going to be exciting going forward. Again, a national champion, a new one will be crowned, getting to have that glory beside your name, so it's... The parity is going to continue right through the playoffs. I'm excited about it. And as those CJHL rankings came out as well, interesting to see where that's going to happen down the stretch too.
Yeah, Collingwood remains on top of the CHL top 20. Flin Flon inching back into the second spot and Steinbach sitting in third. But, a lot of the same teams in similar positions. A bit of a tumble for the Cobras down from 13 to 18. But, we know there's a lot of teams in the mix and 9 leagues that are all going to fight it out for a spot in the Centennial Cup and to hoist that cup as national champions, and the road really just getting started now. And with that excitement, we're looking to the Saskatchewan Junior Hockey League where, we're talking playoffs. There's 3 SJHL teams in the top 20 right now, but the biggest news in the SJHL, Dave, recently has been that the Yorkton Terriers fan base stepped up to ensure that that team will stay in Yorkton. Some difficulties financially. They did a season ticket drive. They hit their target. And the fans in Yorkton showed how much they want the Terriers to remain in their market. And we're joined now by the commissioner of the Saskatchewan Junior Hockey League, Kyle McIntyre. Kyle, really appreciate you taking the time to chat with us today.
Well, thanks for having me, Dave and Shawn. I appreciate the opportunity.
And maybe the biggest story in the SJHL in recent weeks was the fans coming to the plate to save the Yorkton Terriers in that big season ticket drive. How do you feel seeing the way the community responded?
Well, certainly I'm pleased on one hand, Shawn, but I'm not surprised by the response of Yorkton. Like, Yorkton has been one of the anchor franchises in the Saskatchewan Junior Hockey League for almost 60 years, going way back past Jerry James when he was there as coach and general manager. And so certainly it's a hockey community. It's probably one of the larger centers in the Saskatchewan Junior Hockey League. And as both of you guys would know, junior hockey is cyclical. And every once in a while, people have to be reminded that, there is a team and not every team does well financially all the time. And so certainly the Terriers were, they were off to a pretty rough start. They had probably 25% of their games were midweek, which in the Saskatchewan Junior Hockey League is not conducive to having great crowds. And so they got behind the 8 ball there a little bit. The coach that came in, Emery Olofsson, he inherited a team 3 days before training camp. And so his hands were really tied. So the Terriers really did not get off to a great start on the ice. And of course, bums in seats, community involvement, fans in the building, all that stuff kind of is cyclical or kind of builds upon one another. And so the Terriers found themselves just after Christmas in a difficult financial situation. And so they decided they're going to be honest with the community and let people know where they're at. And the community in turn, because it is a hockey hotbed, has really stepped up. So they're just south of 1,000 season tickets. They have a big sportsman's dinner coming up with Shoresy star Terry Ryan in April. They've also got their ag project back up and going. And so I think the Terriers, because of the response of the community and the passion of the fans, are going to be just fine.
And Kyle, Yorkton Terriers, as you know, the last Centennial Cup champions in the Canada back in 2014. And since then, Saskatchewan went through I wouldn't say a bit of a drought, but there were other leagues that were dominating. And the Battle for North Stars last year, what a run, a sensational tournament, and just tripping up a little bit in the national championship. How much excitement is there around the Saskatchewan community when you look at the opportunity that lays itself ahead this year and just the quality of hockey that comes not only in the CJHL, but in Saskatchewan specifically?
Yeah, Dave, we're known for our competitive balance. And the thing about the SJHL is there's an extreme amount of parity, and anyone can win on any given night. And last year, of course, the Battlefords, they were a wagon right from start to finish. And even in the final series, they swept Flin Flon, which no one expected. This year, of course, we have a good competitive balance again. Flin Flon believes that they are the team to beat. but we have a heck of a fight for second place. We have Humboldt, we have Melfort, and then we have North Battleford. And all of those, like the fight for second, no one would ever thought that was going to occur. We always have a fight from 5 to 10 to qualify for the playoffs, and that's going to go right down to the last game on March the 16th. But no one could have anticipated that there was going to be a fight for second. But the thing about the playoffs, like even the 8th seed has the possibility of popping off the number 1 seed because of the parity. I mean, every rink has its own little nuances. Every team has its own home ice advantage, and in the playoffs, anything could happen. So I'm excited about the parity. I know that Mike Reagan and Flin Flon, Mike's design was to not only win the SJHL because he has been the bridesmaid for the last 3 years. It was to really compete with some of the powerhouse teams from other parts of Western Canada. And Flin Flon believes that they have the team, but we're probably going to have 7 other teams that have something to say about that in the playoffs.
What makes Flin Flon as an organization right now special? Because you mentioned the bridesmaid the last few years, maybe the toughest place to play in the Saskatchewan Junior Hockey League, if not all of the CJHL. And now, second ranked in the country in the latest CJHL rankings. What is it about that franchise that they've built over the last few years that has really taken it to the next level again?
Well, there's a number of things going on there, Shawn. Certainly the passion and the support of the community for the Flin Flon Bombers, and the Bombers for the community is a really big thing. But probably you have to look no further than Mike Reagan. And so Mike Reagan has been coach of the Flin Flon Bombers for the last 15 years. He had quite a stellar career in the SJHL himself, and then he went on to play at Sacred Heart in NCAA Division I. And so Mike is a local guy, born and raised in Flin Flon, grew up being a Bomber, passionate about the Bomber. His mom has been involved with the franchise. His uncle Dan was a governor for a number of years. And so Mike is as rooted as anyone in the steep traditions of the Flin Flon Bombers. And certainly Mike is one of the quality coaches in the Saskatchewan Junior Hockey League. And we have many, but he's one that's been around for a long time. He knows how to build a winner. He knows what it takes to play the next level. He's pushed a lot of kids on to NCAA Division I. And so a lot of schools go to him regularly for players and for recommendations. And a lot of kids and a lot of advisors place a lot of kids in his trust because they know that when they leave Flin Flon, they're going to be game ready to play at whatever level they want to play at.
Yeah, and Kyle, I want to pick up right there because you had a guy in the SJHL. I want to go back to Battleford because I was there last year at the Centennial Cup and got to watch a guy like Kean Bell and how much of a treat he was. I could go on and on about some of the other players there, but Kean, as we know, really jumped off the map. A sensational year last year. Started the year with the Edmonton Oil Kings. Wasn't able to put up great numbers there. Came back to the SJHL. Now a goal-a-game player. He played in the QMJHL before. He's played over 70 games in Major Junior. And in Junior A, gives guys such a developmental opportunity to grow their games where maybe you would think a guy like Kean Bell or I'm just using that as an example. There are a lot of other guys that, if you're not able to crack Major Junior, oh, shoot, okay, well, no. Junior A is a great route. You see guys going to the pros. If you're going to speak specifically to the relationship with Hockey Canada, to the CJHL, to developing through the ranks where guys like Kean Bell and other prolific goal scorers have an opportunity to really showcase their stuff.
Yeah, you know what, Dave, a great point. It's quite interesting because, traditionally, most hockey development pathways have gone through the CHL. And so certainly, even though Junior A is quality, we have 9 leagues across Canada. We have 118 teams. We have over 3,000 participants. There are a lot of players that might be more academically inclined. Maybe physically, they aren't quite the same type of a player that could play in the CHL level. Maybe some of these kids need a little more time to develop and to grow and to mature and to gain confidence. And so, sometimes it's being in the right place at the right time. And as a person who follows the Western League quite closely, Shawn and I have a long relationship being involved with the Broncos in the past. As someone who's played in the CJHL for a number of years, I watch a lot of hockey. I watch a lot of the leagues. And I would say the biggest difference that I would see between the CHL and the CJHL is that probably it's the first line prospects. And so when you think about Edmonton, or you think about Medicine Hat, or you think about the Swift Current Broncos, or even the Red Deer Rebels, any teams like that, you'll see that the first line on every WHL team, those kids are high pedigree. A lot of them are high draft picks. A lot of them probably have a good opportunity to play professional hockey. Whereas the second, third, fourth line, or the 3, 4, 5, 6 defensemen, really they're interchangeable in both leagues. And so getting back to Kean Bell, like Kean Bell was someone who played in the Quebec League. He has exceptional skill. He's got very good hockey IQ. He can score from anywhere on the ice. Having wanted to try playing in the Western Hockey League as a 20-year-old this year, I thought he would have more success. But when you think about some of the high-end young prospects that play for the Oil Kings, he's probably not going to get the same opportunity for ice time to play in the role that he's playing in with the Battlefords. Joey Lies playing in Flin Flon, Carter Anderson, who's playing in Flin Flon, Adam McNutt, who's in Flin Flon. All those guys were quality WHL players, but with their specific teams, they were not cast in the roles that they're cast in now. So if I look at, Carter Anderson and Joey Lies, I mean, they form one heck of a line up in Flin Flon, but they're playing minutes that they were not playing in before when they were playing in the Western Hockey League. So they're playing with buddies, they're having fun, they're getting confidence, and they're getting the ice time and the reps and the opportunities, and they're playing in roles that they want to play in. They're playing in offensive roles. But as you move up higher in hockey, not everyone's going to run your power play, and not everyone's going to be on all your special teams, and not everyone's going to be on your first line. And so, again, I would say the CJHL, first and foremost, we're trying to develop kids on and off the ice. But really, we're kind of developing those kids that maybe are late developers, and maybe they need a little more time or a little more confidence and need to play some post-secondary college hockey before they can play at another level. I mean, look at Zach Hyman. So Zach Hyman played in the Ontario Junior Hockey League for years, was never a first liner on any of his junior experience, went down and played NCAA, built some really good skills playing junior A and playing in college. And look at him now. He's going to be a 50-goal man for the Oilers. So sometimes it's just having a little more time and patience. Sometimes it's having opportunity, Dave. But both are quality leagues, and really, I'm a big supporter of both the Western Hockey League and the SJHL. But not every kid's game is going to lend itself well to playing in the CHL.
Yeah, and Kyle, for people who don't know your background, I mean, you mentioned you played at the junior level. Your family, through your father and yourself, ran the most successful at the time midget AAA program in Saskatchewan with the Contacts. You were on the board with the Broncos. You've been a coach, so you've been involved at so many different levels and seen the game evolve. And it feels like from the junior A side, it's a little bit of a transformational time right now. With everything that's happened, the changes in the BC and Alberta leagues. How do you see the big picture in junior A hockey right now, how it's evolving, and where you think the SJHL can be a leader in that position, and how you're trying to grow your league?
Yeah, you know what, the plate tectonics of junior A hockey have certainly been active this year with some of the stuff going on in BC, and you know what, honestly, I would say that CJHL right now, we have a very strong relationship amongst the 9 leagues. The commissioners are on side. We're working very closely with Hockey Canada right now, with the CJHL around the non-sanctioned, the sanctioned, about some of the rules changes and some of the oversight. And really, I think as a collective group of 9 leagues and commissioners, we're in a very good spot right now with Hockey Canada. Hockey Canada recognizes the need to partner with the CJHL and hand over some of the responsibility to the CJHL and its commissioners. And certainly we still think that the Saskatchewan Junior Hockey League and Alberta Junior Hockey League and Manitoba as leagues in the prairies in the West, we all have 3 very strong leagues. And although we have lots of commonalities, we have lots of differences as well. And again, part of our mission statement is that we want to be Canada's premier junior A hockey league. And certainly we know that we can't compete with the Western League in terms of talent or resources, and certainly can't compete with the USHL and BCHL. They play a different brand of hockey than we play. But for kids that are from Saskatchewan and want to remain in Saskatchewan, or for kids that want to have a a good post-secondary opportunity, or even an opportunity to grow and develop and to stay in their home province, we're certainly going to be that league. And I believe that this year we're going to have, like last year, we had an outstanding showing at the Centennial Cup, as Dave, you would know. And certainly we finished second to a stronger team that probably were about a line and maybe one defensive pair stronger. But the thing about North Battleford last year that was unique, 12 kids from Saskatchewan and 5 kids right from North Battleford. One trade throughout the whole year for Alex Isaac. And so certainly homegrown talent, we can compete. The last time the Yorkton Terriers won the RBC Cup, they had 15 kids from Saskatchewan on that team. And so certainly in a lot of areas in Saskatchewan, our greatest imports are people, or exports are people. And certainly something that I've been advocating for is to have more Saskatchewan content in our league. I believe that we can be competitive with at least 50% of our rosters being kids from Saskatchewan or kids with connections to those local communities. Our league really is based in small town Saskatchewan. The communities are very closely tied to the teams. The teams are tied closely to the community. It's really a symbiotic relationship. And certainly for the kids that play in a number of our communities, they could truly have a life-changing experience, not only for hockey, but for life. And really that's my big picture goal as commissioner. But certainly I do believe that we can be competitive with any league in Canada. Our teams will be very competitive this year at the Centennial Cup. And I think that, a lot of the schools are looking for, especially the schools that have coaches or people who've moved through Manitoba, Alberta, Saskatchewan. They kind of have a bias to recruit those kids, because the kids in our league, they will play a 200-foot game, and the Prairie kids work hard and they will compete, and they're people with high character. And I believe that not only will they be successful in hockey, they'll be successful in life. And so really that's what we're trying to build and maintain and sell here. And certainly we're on our way. We're not exactly where I want to be as commissioner yet, but I do think that we're going to have a heck of a playoffs here in a couple of weeks, and we're going to have a real strong showing at the Centennial Cup this year.
Well, and there's a reason why, right, Kyle? I mean, that Saskatchewan produces more NHLers per capita than any other part of Canada, right? So that's a great place to lean into.
Well, hockey is so much a part of the rural fabric in Saskatchewan, and it's certainly important. I don't know if we'll have the same numbers that we were having in the past per capita in Saskatchewan. And again, there's lots of reasons for that, Shawn and Dave. And hockey has become a super expensive sport. And like small towns are diminishing in Saskatchewan because of natural urbanization, and the hockey academies and non-sanctioned hockey are challenging some of the traditional institutions. And so I think we'll still produce our fair share of kids in Saskatchewan. Maybe not the numbers that we'd like to see, but again, we have a real romantic and historical connection between small town Saskatchewan and hockey in general, and hockey at the higher leagues. And I think we'll still see that, maybe not in the numbers we've seen in the past, but who knows? There's lots of good young players playing in our league right now that might use our leagues as a stepping stone and go into the CHL, or they might stay in our league and they might, play NCAA and then move into college or pro hockey when they're done their college career. And so certainly that's our goal. And we're working in close partnership with Hockey Saskatchewan and the CJHL and Hockey Canada. And I still think that junior A hockey is a great opportunity, a great option for many kids in Canada.
Thanks so much, Kyle. We really appreciate you taking the time to chat, and we could go on for a lot longer too, but we really appreciate your time. I hope your playoffs go well, and we look forward to seeing the SJHL representative at the Centennial Cup.
Thanks, Dave and Shawn. Appreciate your interest, and maybe we'll see you both at the Centennial Cup.
Great opportunity to chat with the commissioner of the Saskatchewan Junior Hockey League, Kyle McIntyre, and a lot of interesting things to say. And we could have talked to him for a lot longer. And there's so much to be excited about in junior A hockey these days, Dave. But turning our attention now to playoffs that are ongoing and on HN Live, some junior B hockey in Alberta heating up the Heritage Junior Hockey League into the semifinals. And we've got both the semifinals and the finals on HNLive.ca. And getting started with an overtime win for Sylvan Lake over Medicine Hat in a wonderfully played game on Sunday.
Yeah, and I think this year they decided to go with the crossover North and South Division into the semifinals, and a great choice so far. A couple of incredible games. The Medicine Hat Cubs have been a perennial powerhouse now, but buried in a really tough South Division. So a great starting game there, a 2-1 overtime win in Sylvan Lake, and then the other series you have Rocky up against the Okotoks Bisons, who are the defending provincial silver medalists from last year and looking to maybe right the ship this year. So some incredible hockey there. Semifinals in both of the leagues that we cover.
Yeah, 5-2 for Okotoks over Rocky in game 1 of that series. Game 2 of Sylvan Lake and Medicine Hat is Thursday from Sylvan Lake, and then Friday, Rocky hosts Okotoks. Both those games on HNLive.ca. You had a chance to call, Dave, the Sherwood Park Knights game 1 of the semifinal. Didn't go their way for the two-time defending Capital Junior Hockey League champions.
Yeah, and in the Capital League finals, you have Beaumont against Sherwood Park in East Division finals, then Morinville and St. Albert in the other ones. The top two teams really throughout the regular season in each of the division finals, and Sherwood Park took this season series up against Beaumont this year. The last two games in the 2024 portion of the calendar were a little bit closer, but talking with the coaching staff before the game, they said we want to come out, play defensively, and really mitigate a lot of the damage and keep the pucks to the perimeter. And the Sherwood Park Knights, one of the highest scoring teams in all of Alberta Junior B in all the 5 leagues this year, and only put up 1 on Beaumont yesterday. They won that game 4-1. So, in chatting post-game with the Beaumont staff and the Sherwood Park staff, I know that series is far from over. Game number 3 on HNLive comes up on Friday night.
You'd say, Dave, maybe they have some unfinished business?
Unfinished business indeed. And broadcast is all about segues, is it not?
Speaking of unfinished business, HNLive very proud to be the streaming home, the pay-per-view home for Dungeon Wrestling Unfinished Business 2, coming up on March 29th. We are joined by the Stu Hart champion, who's set to defend his crown against Steve Macklin on March 29th. Unfinished Business 2 for Dungeon Wrestling on HNLive.ca. There it is. Chris Masters, thanks so much for taking the time to chat with us today.
Just in case you are wondering, yes, I am in my car and traveling with the Dungeon Championship in the passenger seat with the seatbelt on, by the way. So, yeah, I mean, I take it everywhere. The grocery store, the gym, the park, it goes everywhere. I mean, it's prestigious. It's the Stu Hart Championship. And then even better, even funnier yet, I have actually the WWC title in the back seat. So I should have said that out loud. They might get hot. You know, sometimes the WWC title rides shotgun. You know what I mean? They alternate.
Well, I mean, to be honest, growing up, I think we were all wrestling fans, and if we had a real belt, we'd want to carry it everywhere, right? Into the grocery store, to the gas station. So you get to live that real life situation.
Oh yeah, it's pretty cool, man. It's you know what the funny part about it is you know, I won the Dungeon title or the Stu Hart title at Dungeon Wrestling, and which has been tremendous being there. By the way, I've had some tremendous matches there, but and then I went to Puerto Rico like recently and won that title, and like so my whole question in my mind was like how do you walk out like with 2 titles and still do your entrance? Like it was literally something I kind of had to walk through and figure out like if I wanted to wear both of them, you know what I mean? Which I did for all the reasons you just outlined, you know.
You mentioned the prestige of being the Stu Hart champion. I mean,
yeah.
one of the great legends of the sport. What did it mean to you to win a championship that had that name on it?
Oh my gosh. I mean, for me, I think anybody from my generation, well, and beyond, you know, because Bret Hart is timeless, the Hart family, their royalty. But like I just grew up in the Hart family, and Bret Hart, Stu Hart, Owen, they were such a big part of my young fandom, my childhood growing up. And, you know, like Stu Hart was always put on a pedestal, you know what I mean? Like he was always honored from the minute I became aware of him. And like some of the funniest imitations have been of actually of Stu Hart too, you know what I mean? He's a funny guy to imitate, and I'm not saying I can do it, but like, you know, just like for me, you know, I was such a fan of Bret Hart, and like, you know, seeing Bret, you know, rise to the top in the way he did, you know, seeing the way he won the Intercontinental title against Mr. Perfect with Stu Hart there and Helen Hart. And these are all like huge memories for me, and some of my fondest. And then even like, the Bret Hart Roddy Piper feud. Like Stu Hart. Even if you didn't grow up with watching Stu Hart the wrestler, as a fan from my childhood, Stu Hart was entangled in like everything that related to the Harts, or a lot of the big storylines. And the dungeon was like legendary and a thing of mystique, and still to this day. And and then like even when I look at like Stampede Wrestling, when I looked back at Stampede Wrestling, man, like there was such innovation coming out of there. Like I think some of my favorite early I wasn't aware of Stampede at the time, being a Los Angeles kid, but it was just like looking back at it, they were such innovators, and like some of the best wrestling came. I think they might have even revolutionized, kind of changing the business a little bit, as far as how going from that era, like the Ric Flairs and the call it on the fly style, which nothing wrong with that. I love that. I trained under Rip Rogers, but a little more thought was put into stuff, and creativity. Just like anything else, it was actually really, when you look at it, was just like the evolution of professional wrestling, and nothing's ever going to stay the same. It's always going to change a little bit, but should stay grounded in some fundamental values, if that makes sense. But to go back to the Stu Hart title means everything, man. Anybody who sees that title, man, like I show that title off at every locker room I go to. I defend it at every indie show that I can, and like it carries weight. It's not just, and it's a beautiful title on top of it.
Well, and yeah, you talked about the inspiration that the Hart family was, and for those maybe who are watching who don't know, did you have the opportunity to be mentored actually by Stu Hart in the dungeon and the Hart family? Was that part of your journey to the professional ranks on your way up?
No, gosh, I wish it was, but no, it wasn't. I mean, I think by the time I was breaking in, I don't think Stu was I don't know how hands-on Stu was with any training at that point, but my training came out of UPW. But as far as like, again, my inspirations, I mean, like Bret Hart was a huge inspiration to me. Like he was, he was one of the first guys. He was actually the first guy that I recognized, like any kid, when I first started watching wrestling, like I was attracted, you're either a Warrior guy or a Hogan guy initially. And I was a Warrior guy. The face paint, the music, all the flash, like the body, it really was captivating. But, we know what happened. Warrior, it came and went. And then somewhere in that time frame, I started seeing first Bret Hart and then even HBK, and seeing what they brought. And to me, that was just a whole, like, that's cool what the Warrior did, but like, that was just something different. It was like there was an art to that I appreciated just a little more than, all that over the topness of those characters. It was a little more grounded in reality, a little more based in athleticism and pro wrestling and creativity, and not just, feeding the fans the same thing every given night, month after month, year after year, and decade after decade.
How cool must it have been for you then to have grown up admiring guys like Bret Hart and Shawn Michaels, to then, as a very young man, to get to the World Wrestling Entertainment and have a feud with Shawn Michaels? What was that experience like for you?
Oh, gosh. It was, I might as well have been winning the world championship for me. It was, if you were to give me a bucket list of my things to do in wrestling, obviously the world title would be on there. Wrestling Shawn Michaels on pay-per-view, though, specifically, because, he, to me, was such a, growing up and watching Shawn, you just knew that, like, he was one of those guys that you knew that when the pay-per-view came, he was going to, like, turn it up. You know what I mean? He was like, and same thing with Bret, too. You know what I mean? But, like, you just knew those guys were going to turn it up, and they were going to give you a pay-per-view level performance. Like, and like, what they would do on regular TV was already so awesome as it is. You know what I mean? Like, but they would even turn it up another notch, as you should for a pay-per-view when people are paying to see you. So like, yeah, working Shawn on a pay-per-view, and not like screwing the pooch, to quote Bill DeMott, was everything to me. It was, but I have to say, in the moment, it was stressful because I was so worried about that. Like, because in my mind, I didn't want to be the first guy in history to have a bad match with Shawn Michaels on pay-per-view. Not to think that I thought that was going to happen, but like even the chance of that would have devastated me. So it put a lot of pressure on me. But like when I look back at it now, man, it's a lot of fun. And I like more recently, I recognize that the timing of it was probably the coolest too, because it came right out of that Hulk Hogan feud. So you just came off the only little bit of heel Shawn Michaels you were going to get. But also, if you watch Shawn, when he transitions to the feud with me, he has such a different energy. And I think, like, for me, it was the perfect time to work him, because he just went from working Hulk, who was, we've heard about how that all went. You know what I mean? It was Rocky and with those guys and stuff. And two big egos, to working this kid who's just like ready to bump for him and do whatever. And like, is basically a mark for him. And like when I look back at it now, I can see that, like, and I didn't even notice at the time, like, that he was really appreciating that in that moment. You know what I mean? And I didn't think that, because like I was just thinking, like, he probably doesn't care that much about working me. I mean, how many pay-per-view matches he worked or whatever. But again, I think just specifically that time was like a good time, and it made him really open to the experience with me and trying. And like, to him, I just felt like it was his chance to make somebody, because he bragged about it every chance he could get after the match. But he'd always say how he made the masterpiece, which I had no problem with whatsoever. I was like, yep, you did.
Chris, I want to ask you about, Shawn and I grew up, as many people watching this, grew up watching wrestling in the heydays. We talked about the Hogan and the Warrior, and then you get to the Attitude Era with D-Generation X, and then, WCW emerges on, and kind of from there. I think a lot of people can hold that near and dear to heart, where they would say, the Bret Hart era post, after Attitude, things, you look at attendance-wise, kind of fell off a little bit. And well, I want to ask you about the emergence of, traditional style wrestling again, where, things maybe got a little more on the mic work and things like that. But what does dungeon wrestling mean to the art of wrestling when it comes to some of your mentors like Shawn Michaels and Bret Hart? And how exciting is it to be as part of that process and bringing wrestling back to its purest form?
Well, I love it because, I think Bret is very outspoken, but I think there's a lot of truth to what he says, you know what I mean? And it's like, and it goes back to what we were talking about a few minutes ago, like everything is going to evolve. But like when it comes to the way Bret Hart and like a place like Dungeon Wrestling sees it, like it's always going to be based in realism too. Like you're never going to sacrifice the art just so you can do some kind of Circus LA high spot, you know what I mean? Like, so, that's kind of where I think it differs as far as mentality, you know what I mean? It doesn't mean it's stuck in any past time frame. Like, it just means you have to make sense out of everything you do. Psychology is still emphasized. Strikes and stuff like that are just looked at as like connective tissue to the next high spot. And, and like, that's the whole idea. I mean, like, people kind of know what this is, professional wrestling. The whole idea in my mind, or the way I at least see it, is like, is to make everybody in the crowd believe. And that kind of really honestly just starts with the performer believing in what he's doing. So, I think that is kind of what, in my mind, dungeon wrestling and, at least like what Bret Hart emphasizes a lot. And, I don't differ, you know what I mean? I agree 100%. Well, Bret's just as unfiltered as anybody I've ever seen. But like, he's Bret Hart. Like, if anybody has kind of earned the right to do that, I think it's Bret. Like, and you kind of have to love that. And at this time, like, this is a time period, I think, where, and I've heard a lot of this, where authenticity is a big deal. Like, there's been so much overproduced kind of stuff, like when you look at The Rock, like he's turned heel, that like candor and not being overly scripted or overly cautious with your words, is kind of a welcoming side again. You know what I mean? And people aren't maybe as worried about getting canceled either as much anymore, I hope.
Now, you replied to a comment made by the voice of Dungeon Wrestling, Mike McGuire, on HNLive Today last week, where he spoke about your evolution as a performer and how much you had changed and grown since your time in WWE. And it's not that you weren't a great wrestler, a great athlete then, but your style's evolved, your approach has evolved. Can you speak about that a little bit? Because you seem to really connect with what he said about that.
Oh, yeah. Well, I just really got to take that in today because I spent the weekend, my stomach was like, I lost like 12 pounds. Let's put it that way, I was ill. But like today I'm finally recovering, and I saw that on the feed, and it was beautifully said. It's everything it's been the main focus of my life throughout the last few years, because I know that, I don't have, 20 years of working ahead of me, or, maybe even 10. Like, so like post-pandemic, the pandemic did a lot to me, but it really helped me kind of reevaluate how I was going to approach pro wrestling, along with having the platform of the National Wrestling Alliance. I don't want to overlook that. But it really just kind of helped me reapproach every facet of my game, whether it be the way I dress, the style I work, the way I conduct my promos, or the mentality I have going into them. And really, to sum it up, what it came down to is it was getting in touch with the fan in me, because I loved wrestling since I was a kid. I mean, this has been my main thing my whole life. You know, I had maybe 2 years of lapsed fandom, but it was getting in touch with my earliest fandom, and then realizing and recognizing what he liked, and just trying to focus everything on what he liked, you know, and making him a fan. And really, it kind of helped simplify things. And like, you know, I just tried to make little tweaks to evolve. And the wrestling part's a huge one. But it wasn't just the wrestling. Like, obviously, you stated in the wrestling, which I love, you know, as far as, you know, it's definitely much more, you know, technical, a lot more agility and movement. But I mean, that's what I loved in my performers growing up. I loved Mr. Perfect. I loved Ric Flair. I loved Shawn Michaels, Bret Hart. All those guys were able to cover that. They weren't so big that they had to be, you know what I mean, a 280-pound monster. They were more athletic guys that could move around the ring well and create more exciting matches. And so that was my focus on the in-ring stuff. Was like, okay, I'm not going to be 280 pounds, nor do I want to be 280 pounds. I just fell into this thing where my body you know, my bodybuilding, everything came together where I just fell into that thing early in my career where I was a body guy. I didn't even anticipate that. I just, all of a sudden I was cast along with Luger and all those other guys, and I just made it work for me, but I don't think it was ever really the style of wrestler I wanted to be. I didn't want to be the overly huge guy that had to stagger on tackles and stuff. But that doesn't mean I want to be a skinnier, small guy. I just wanted to be that more happy medium. Again, that Mr. Perfect kind of is a good archetype. You know, a guy who could still be big but athletic too. You know what I mean? Like, I don't need to be the biggest guy in the locker room or the tannest guy. I just want to be a good amount of those. And like, so again, like you guys were saying in the interview, it just, like, with that, it just led to my change in style. Like the fact that I was, you know, I geared my look towards that. It made me more athletic. And like, I started kind of recognizing like, oh, this is the performer I was really kind of always meant to be. But like, you know, I ended up kind of falling into that, like, you're going to be a body guy. And you know what I mean? And like, I was still athletic even in my young career. But, you know, again, like when WWE first introduced me, I was 20 years old. So, I mean, with the experience I have now, and, you know, it's just, there's just no comparison. You know what I mean? Like, to the guy I was then and now. And I've tried to honestly just separate. I've made the most conscious effort in the last couple of years, 2 to 3 years, to try to distance myself and evolve as much as possible to the point where, you know, hopefully I can almost be a different guy.
Well, I'm glad you said Mr. Perfect, because when I look at your shtick, suppose for lack of a better term, and the character that you're portraying in some of the videos I've watched, I thought, like, there's a little Shawn Michaels, there's a little Razor Ramon, there's a little bit of Kurt Hennig, which, in my opinion, may be the best wrestler ever to never win.
I love that you said Scott. But just real quick, I love that you said Scott, because I wouldn't even thought about that. But Scott, like, I feel like Scott is a guy I never give enough credit to, because he's a guy that I loved to imitate as a kid. I used to love to do his poses. So whether I even say it out loud or not, it's just like you said, the seeds of all these guys, a little bit of all these guys is planted in me, and like, whether it's conscious or not. And the Scott Hall one is, you know, not even when I do consciously.
Now, looking at you in that sunshine in
Sorry for interrupting you, man.
No, it's you read my mind. I was just going to ask you about the inspiration side of it, because, I mean, we all, you know, I think as kids we're like, I want to be this guy and that guy. And as a longtime wrestling fan, not as much lately, but I'm looking at him going, okay, there's Razor Ramon, there's Mr. Perfect, there's Shawn Michaels, there's a little bit of all that. So that's awesome. Great stuff. Go ahead, Shawn.
Now, just looking at you sitting in the sunshine in California. Now, I know you mentioned it before we got on the air. Yeah, well, we are. But you mentioned before we got on the air that you had shoveled some cars out of snow in Toronto, living there for a couple of years. So we consider you an honorary Canadian, going up against a guy on Dungeon Wrestling Unfinished Business 2 and Steve Macklin, who's got kind of that, you know, American angle to him a little bit, and a former TNA world champion. So just tell us about that matchup and what we can expect on March 29th on HNLive.ca.
I mean, I think it's going to be a physical affair. I mean, I've had like Steve Macklin, like I've done some homework on him, and I'm quite honestly, I'm going to have to do some more because this guy just seems very physical, and I've just become aware of him. Like, I feel like he really started kind of making a name for himself within the last few years, and just has really built up this resume and become, like just one of the top guys doing it today. So I think this is going to be a heck of a matchup. And when it was presented to me, I was all game, you know what I mean? Because they hit me up about this, and I'm like, yeah, that would definitely be a hell of a matchup and a physical contest, and something I think Brett would enjoy, and all the people, all the fans in Calgary and Dungeon Wrestling. And, so March 29th is going to be, let's put it this way, I got that one circled on the calendar.
Well, that's awesome, Chris. We really appreciate you taking the time to join us today. Great conversation with the masterpiece, Chris Masters, Chris Adonis, whatever you want to call him. He's the Stu Hart Heritage Champion for Dungeon Wrestling, and will face Steve Macklin on March 29th. And what a great conversation, Dave.
Very transparent guy. And I think anybody who grew up as a wrestling fan, which I think in our generation was pretty much everybody, right? So in being able to hear the stories of him as a kid, and I wanted to get into wrestling, and then, it wasn't really a body, a big jacked guy. I just kind of got into it, and the inspirations and how those things go into a shtick. Those are all the things that you, as a wrestling observer, pre-social media era, with the opportunity to talk to some of these athletes, would think, he looks a lot like him. I wonder if that guy inspired him. So that, to me, was my biggest takeaway. I thought that was pretty cool.
It's Steve Macklin, the challenger for Chris Masters, coming up on March 29th on HNLive.ca. Time now for our top plays of the week. For Adrenaline Source for Sports, Calgary's premier store for hockey, lacrosse, and team apparel, recently renovated and bigger and better than ever. A one-stop shop for all your sporting good needs. Visit us online at adrenalinegroup.ca. We fit your game. Dave.
Noah Bassel certainly fit the Beaumont Chiefs game yesterday. They blocked a lot of shots, kept it to the perimeter, yet to come up big with that high-powered Knights offense. He made a massive save in the second period in order to keep the game within reach, and he was sprawled out and got the glove off. That is my play of the week for me.
There is nothing like playoff overtime. And boy, was it on display in the Heritage Junior Hockey League on Sunday in Game 1 of the semifinal between Medicine Hat and Sylvan Lake. Went to double overtime, and sometimes in double OT it takes a broken play like it did here for Brett Garrett's getting the overtime winner for Sylvan Lake. The Wranglers take the lead against the Cubs. They'll play again Thursday. Well, that'll do it for us. What a show. Thank you to Kyle McIntyre and to Chris Masters. For Dave Dawson and Alex, man in the show, I'm Shawn Mullin. Thanks for watching HN Live Today.